There are four muscles on the lower leg that have their origin on the lower leg, and then cross both the ankle joint and the toe joint, and have their distal attachments at the toes in the phalanges down here. So these are the four muscles that have actions at the ankle and the tarsus joints, and then also these are the only four that have an action on the toes. And of course, there's other muscles in the feet that act on the toes too, but these are the only four that we're going to talk about in the lower leg that act on the toes. And it's pretty easy to remember these four muscles and their actions on the toes because their name literally tells us. So the flexor hallucis longus is a muscle that flexes the hallux. The extensor hallucis longus is a muscle that extends the hallux and such. And just FYI, these are all longus muscles that have correlating brevis muscles, but those are all intrinsic muscles in the foot, and we're not really talking about those right now. They're not in the lower leg. So the name pretty much tells us what kind of action that muscle has on the toe joint, and then we can learn some other things about it just from using logic and reasoning. So if we think about it, any muscle that let's say extends the toe. So a muscle that extends the toe means it's going to be bringing the toe more up this way. So extends or brings it into a position of hyperextension. That muscle must run along the top side of the foot because a muscle contracts, shortens, and to have the action of extending the toe, it has to run along the top of the foot to shorten and have that action occur. So then any muscle that runs along the top of the foot and then up here to the leg somewhere is also going to have an action of dorsiflexion on the ankle. So any muscle, we can just use the reasoning, any muscle that is a extender of the toe joint is also going to be active in dorsiflexion of the ankle joint. And vice versa for the ones that flex the toes. Remember, flexing the toes is like curling the toes, so curling the toes down this way. So any muscle that curls the toes, it makes sense for that to be running along the plantar side of the foot, along the bottom of the foot, and then when it comes up here and attaches, when it contracts, it's going to flex the toes and also going to plantar flex the ankle. So any muscle that flexes the toes, so the flexor hallucis longus or the flexor digitorum longus, is going to flex the toes and also plantar flex the ankle. So the actions on the toes and on the ankle are pretty easy to figure out. What about the actions of the tarsus? What about pronation and supination? Well, those also, we can use some reasoning to kind of make some educated guesses that are mostly true as to how these work. So the hallux, the big toe, is on the medial part of the leg, and the other four digits are comparatively lateral. So any of the flexor hallucis or the extensor hallucis, any of these hallucis muscles are going to be naturally on the medial side of the foot. They have this action on the medial side. So when they contract, any of the hallucis muscles are going to also supinate the foot. Those are also going to be involved in supination, which just makes sense. If you have a hallucis, let's see, the one on the top of the foot would be the extensor hallucis longus. So this one up here is going to be pulling, and if you just look at where the muscle goes, then it makes sense that it's going to supinate the foot. Similarly, for the flexor hallucis longus, it would be back here, but it's still going to be involved in the hallux. So even though it has the opposite joints at the toe and the ankle, it's flexing the toes and plantar flexing the ankle, it still is on this medial side, so it's still going to be supinating the tarsus. And then for the digitorum muscles, so let's see, the extensor digitorum longus is this one right here. We can see it, and it runs along the dorsal side of the foot and attaches at the toes. So it's going to extend the toes. It's going to dorsiflex the ankle. And now the toes are on the lateral side of the foot compared to the big toe. These digits are on the lateral side, so it makes sense, and we can see just along the path of this tendon that when it contracts, it's going to pronate the foot. So when this muscle contracts, it's going to extend the toes, dorsiflex the ankle, and pronate the tarsus. And that makes sense because it's on the lateral side, and we can remember that because it's a digitorum muscle, and the digits are more lateral than the hallux. So then it would make sense that the flexor digitorum longus, you would think it would do the same thing, but this one is the exception to the rule. Even though it is a digitorum muscle, then if you look at the path, it actually goes on the medial side of the foot, and it still goes underneath, so it still has an action of flexion at the toes and plantar flexion at the ankle. But this one is the one weird one where it actually, even though it's one of the digitorum muscles, it is going to be involved in supination of the tarsus. So the flexor digitorum longus is the one exception, but if you can just remember that the flexor digitorum longus also supinates the tarsus, then everything else should make sense based on the name. And you should be able to just look at the name and then figure out, oh, okay, I know it's a flexor, or I know it's an extensor, and I know it's we're acting on the hallux or the digits, and then everything should be able to make sense. You should be able to figure it out from there, so long as you remember the one exception, that the flexor digitorum longus actually supinates the tarsus instead of pronating.